In the last 2 weeks since the Indian Army started taking preemptive actions in eastern Ladakh and putting the pressure on China, very predictably China has upped the pressure as far as propaganda is concerned. They've started taunting Indian soldiers. They're using their very big mouthpiece Global Times to pour scorn on India's soldiers, saying they're worthless and they can't survive at high altitudes. Perhaps Global Times and their masters in China don't know that no ground force or army on earth is deployed year-round at altitudes beyond 20,000 feet like the Indian Army. Take a look.
If Indian troops don't withdraw from the southern bank of Pangong Tso Lake, the PLA will confront them all winter long. Indian troops' logistics are poor. Many Indian soldiers will die of freezing temperature or COVID-19. With these drones, the PLA's frontline soldiers can enjoy hot meals once winter reaches the plateau. Some sympathize with the nearby Indian soldiers who can only eat cold canned food and have to endure the severe cold and potential spread of COVID-19. Two tweets that give you a flavor of Chinese propaganda, courtesy Xi Jinping's propaganda-in-chief and editor of the virulent state-owned media outlet Global Times. The mind games designed to taunt the Indian army and suggest that Indian soldiers aren't built for the long haul at high altitudes. Does India need to engage with such claims, or do the facts about Indian soldiers speak for themselves? Not that Indian citizens need reassurance about the Indian Army's capabilities, but we thought it's a good idea to show why the Chinese government's claims, through its attack dog of choice, Global Times, are laughably short of facts. For starters, the Indian Army is the only army that deploys at super high altitudes like Siachen and elsewhere all through the year. With special clothing and supplies, these soldiers and officers are mountain warriors in the truest sense. They not only survive, but are fighting fit at altitudes where most cannot hope to survive. And that's because the Indian Army is the only true mountain warfare army in the world. One that spends its time training to hold the most hostile heights and battlefields, from eastern Ladakh to the Siachen Glacier. Chinese state-sponsored taunts that Indian soldiers are ineffective at super high altitudes also fall flat. While India does not feel the need to flaunt exercise images like China, these rare videos of Indian Army snow warriors and special forces with their weapon and equipment at super high altitudes sends out an unmistakable message about the ability to perform at those heights. On the back of China's taunts about how Indian soldiers wouldn't survive the harsh winters, this undated video cropped up on social media showing Indian Army troops during an hour of rest and recreation playing kabaddi, a strenuous cardio-filled game at over 14,000 feet. The video has gone viral and shows how conditioned and acclimatized Indian troops are to high altitudes, not just to survive and stand guard, but even play sports that require a great deal of energy. And finally, right around the time the Chinese were fuming over the Indian Army's preemptive actions in South Pangong and formulating their virulent mind games on Indian soldiers, this is what was happening at the world's highest helipads on the Siachen Glacier. These exclusive images show India's new indigenous light utility helicopter completing super high altitude trials with army pilots at the Amar and Sonam posts. Bureau Report, India Today.
And Gaurav Sawant is live with me from the high altitudes of Ladakh. Gaurav, pretty silly claims by the Chinese. One would have expected that in such a volatile situation, the least the Chinese would do is, respect the adversary. Nobody ever outpours scorn and derision and says these vulgar things about even enemy troops. India doesn't do that even with, you know, a lowly nation like Pakistan. And we certainly won't do it with China because there's always a mutual respect as far as professional soldiers are concerned. Obviously, Global Times, has tried to paint Indian soldiers as ineffective. And while the Indian government is not going to engage with that propaganda, we here have shown our viewers just how capable India is as far as mountain warfare is concerned.
Shiv, you're spot on. You and I have both reported from the Siachen Glacier, where the Indian Army has been deployed since the April of 1984. Then the Kargil War of 1999, where soldiers were fighting at altitudes between 12 and 17.5, 18,000 feet. So our soldiers have decades of experience in fighting in high altitude, not only surviving, but emerging victorious. Line of actual control is slightly different in terms of the terrain and the climate. But again, because of the exercises that have been carried out here, the deployment that's been carried out at Daulat Beg Oldie, at Pangong So, at Chumar and Demchok, our soldiers are battle hardened and they know the terrain, they know the lay of the land. So for them, surviving here is much easier. They're like fish in water. For the Chinese soldiers, and I don't want to say this, they themselves know their soldiers hardly have, one, any combat experience, two, any high altitude experience, and three, they are not those sturdy, tough soldiers who will survive in the outdoors. They in fact have asked their army to build air-conditioned barracks with separate oxygen rooms. So if they live in those barracks, how will they fight a war outside?
Yes.
Remains the question. They do have a technological advantage to an extent, but in high altitude, that will be negated if the balloon goes up, God forbid.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of mountain warfare, snow warfare, nothing comes close to the, to the Indian Army, because no other army on earth, let me repeat this, no other army on earth stays deployed all year round at altitudes in excess of 20,000 feet. That's the Siachen Glacier, other parts of northern Ladakh. These are super high altitudes, and these are places where nobody but the Indian Army stays deployed all year round. It's one thing to be deployed for a few days or a few weeks or a few months at a time, but to remain there 365 days a year without pause is something else entirely. I want our viewers to bear that in mind when you listen to any Chinese taunts. Joining me live, Gaurav, stay with me. Joining me live are two Indian Army veterans who've been mountain warriors themselves. Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, former General Officer Commanding of the 15 Corps, Brigadier Sandeep Thapar is a veteran infantry officer. Both of these officers have been mountain warriors in their own regard. They know what it's like to be deployed in the super high altitude terrains in which the Indian Army is deployed even today. General Hasnain, coming to you first. We will always respect adversary soldiers, sir, because at the end of the day, professional soldiers must be respected. They are only doing their political master's bidding. In this particular case, the taunts that have come from China are only to be expected. They are in very bad taste, saying Indian soldiers will not be able to survive the winter. Obviously, the facts on the ground speak otherwise. You've been there. You tell us, sir.
Sir Shiv, this is the old ploy of the PLA, adopted from 1993, War under Informationized Conditions, 2003, the three strategies. They've adopted it, but they've not been able to refine it. And I'm surprised that the PLA has such poor ethics. The professional armies around the world are respected when they actually demonstrate ethics on the ground. This is unethical to talk about your adversary in such terms. And they know very well that this is absolutely false. This is propaganda. They know what the Indian Army is capable of, the manner in which we have been deployed in Siachen from 1984 till now, the way we have been in high altitude, other areas in operations, the way we demonstrated in 1967,
yes,
the incident at Nathula. Every time we have bested them, we have shown them, but we have never sort of in any way humiliated them in this manner. Now, this is the new normal as far as the PLA is concerned, because they think that this is good information warfare, which is impinging on the minds of the Indian Army, impinging on the minds of the Indian people. We need not respond in kind at all. All you need to tell our people is, and our people are aware of the capabilities of the Indian Army. They're aware of the capabilities of our own people on the ground, from where our soldiers emerge. So there's no need to at all tell the PLA. Let the PLA be nicely surprised when they come to battle anywhere in Eastern Ladakh or anywhere on the LAC.
And they will be surprised if it ever comes to that, and I hope it doesn't come to that, because after all, India does want peace. India doesn't want war. It's China that has been doing all the warmongering. Brigadier Thapar, you have operated, you have commanded, you have, functioned in the super high altitude theaters of this country. Does anyone need to reply to the Chinese? Here on India Today, we are showing our viewers pictures of our soldiers, playing kabaddi absolutely without a care at 14,000 feet, operating brilliantly at 22,000 feet. We don't need to reply and tell the Chinese this is the reality, but the public wanted to know, and that's why we've done it. You've been there, sir.
Shiv, thank you for having me. I read that tweet. I found it very childish and immature, insensitive, and I replied. I said, challenge accepted.
Yeah.
Because the Indian Army, Shiv, and the whole world knows we are deployed on the Himalayas. The moment you cross the Pir Panjal north of Rajouri and Poonch, you enter Gulmarg, and then from there to the top, further to the east, the entire JK, it's all high altitude. You come further east, you come to Himachal and Uttarakhand mountains. Again, we are deployed on high altitude. You go to Sikkim, you go to Arunachal. There's no place where we are not on white-shot mountains. In fact, the Prime Minister used a word in this speech, Durgam Pahad. Half my life has been spent on those Durgam Pahad, and I love those tenures. I do not think any army in the world has that much experience in high altitude or mountain warfare as much as the Indian Army. The total border, over 3,000 kilometers. Every infantry unit, every third tenure, or so to say, is on high altitude. Third, if not third, the fourth tenure. So every 6 to 7 years, infantry unit goes. So a Jawan in his 15, 16 years has visited the high altitude at least 3 times. 6 to 7 years he spent there. So, like you said, there's no more experienced army than us in the world.
Absolutely no doubts in anybody's mind about the abilities of the Indian Army. Of course, there is a great deal of curiosity about equipment. There is no curiosity whatsoever or no reassurance needed in the Indian public about what Indian Army's effectiveness is at high altitude. Since 1984 and even before that, the Indian Army has not just operated, but operated at battle readiness at super high altitudes. Just try and picture what it must like to not just stay alive, but function to military capacity at altitudes in excess of 22,000 feet. Now I want to show you, gentlemen, stay with me. I want to show you just a sort of very broad idea of the kind of equipment that the Indian Army uses during such high altitude deployments, like the ones that you're seeing in Eastern Ladakh. Take a look at some of the equipment that the Indian Army is using for its small special teams that are taking up those dominating heights of 16,000 feet and above, especially in Eastern Ladakh. These are the posts, remember, that the Chinese are not very happy about. Just wanted you to get a view of what it looks like. Arctic tents are there, to protect from the wind and the cold. They're very thin, but are very good at keeping in the heat and keeping out the cold. There is a space heating device that many of these units have that's used for warming tents and also for cooking food. These are very, very portable. There are thermal imagers. Now coming to the military stuff. Thermal imagers with built-in video and image recording capabilities, which have a 5-kilometer range and also incorporates GPS. Extremely valuable, because this is what the Indian Army units at those heights in Eastern Ladakh use to keep track of the Chinese movements. There are very high-frequency radio sets for communication with base in Chushul, in Takung and elsewhere. Ready-to-eat high-calorie foods and meals are also available, because supply lines may be cut at any time, so high-nutrition meals are kept with these troops. Ammunition for assault, obviously sniper rifles like the Barrett M82 bunker-busting rifle, assault rifles of all kind. We understand that even anti-tank weaponry has been kept at some of these heights in eastern Ladakh. Extreme cold weather clothing is always there. There have been problems in the past in procuring such items, but now all of that has been completely cleared up. This is clothing that helps soldiers survive in and operate in temperatures up to -20 degrees. There are sleeping bags usable in -50 degrees temperature. Ladies and gentlemen, these are conditions that most of us cannot imagine. General Hasnain, I certainly cannot imagine this, sir. For most of us civilians wrapping our heads around, I can picture going to a place like this and being there for a few minutes, maybe a couple of hours. Gaurav and I have both traveled to Siachen. We've been there a couple of hours and then we rushed back. These are people who've got to be there year-round, sir.
Absolutely. Shiv, it's a challenge. There's a challenge, there's no doubt. But let me tell you, two things really make up for all the negatives we can think about. Number one is the overall logistics system. We talk a lot about operations. We love to talk about operations in every field. But it is logistics, the silent working element from behind. All the time, meticulous, they're going into figures, they're doing lots and lots of networking. And from everywhere in India, I can assure you, material is being collected today from Ahmedabad, from Mumbai, from Coimbatore, everywhere. Items are being brought and flown to Leh. From Leh, they are being distributed. There's a system in place completely that you'll be surprised to see the kind of pipeline which works so meticulously. Yes. The second thing is the spirit. And this is where regimentation comes in. Our units are based on regiments. My own regiment, the Garhwal Rifles, they are there together. They know that the Maltese Cross, which is their badge, they know their lanyard, royal red lanyard on the right shoulder. They can bond together. There is, in those domains, there is no religion, there is no caste, there's nothing. Yeah. Everyone is single. He's an Indian. And that's the most important thing. You can be of any faith or any caste or anything. You are an Indian. You fight together, you bond together, you belong to the same regiment. You fight under the same badge. Absolutely. This is the spirit. The spirit of this, good operational planning, excellent leadership, and solid logistic backing. This is what ultimately makes up a whole system for victory.
An incredibly detailed description by General Hasnain, not just as someone who has seen this, but someone who has lived this, who has operated this, and so has Brigadier Thapar. And remember, it's not just Chinese mind games as far as Indian troops are concerned, but also Indian equipment. Today, for instance, this morning, the Chinese Global Times put out a video showing them bombing some tanks during an exercise. It's made a lot of people wonder, why are they showing such a specific act of warmongering, of destroying tanks and saying that Indian tanks will be destroyed in this manner? Why is China so spooked? Have Indian tanks in some way added pressure on the Chinese? Take a look.
Right before Corps Commander level talks, this latest piece of warmongering propaganda from China, designed to heighten temperature in typical Xi Jinping style. But hidden in this aggressive image, which explicitly claims to depict tank-destroying exercises in Tibet, is an admission of something else. A powerful indicator that the Chinese have been spooked by Indian tank movements in eastern Ladakh. Let's try and decode why the Chinese would fire such an obvious and specific propaganda bullet, illustrating the destruction of tanks. The immediate trigger for this propaganda assault appears to be the fact that Chinese tank units are fully in Indian sights following the Indian Army's preemptive actions on August 29. Chinese Type 88 tank units are now within line of sight from dominant heights now held by the Indian Army. That's not all. Chinese tanks, which had rumbled close to the heights held by the Indian Army, had to hold position for another reason.
Assume that this is the south bank of the Pangong Tso. Behind me, you can see the beautiful Pangong Tso Lake, and also behind me are the locations where the Indian forces have occupied some strategic heights. Now, as a result of this action by the Indian forces, tanks on both sides have come very close to each other. Now, the red line you see is the line of actual control. You can see Chinese tanks which have been stopped in their tracks by decisive Indian force action, but there are also Indian tanks that are already deployed in the plains of Chushul that have been lying in wait. As a result of which, just 9.5 kilometers separates tank groups on both sides. And anyone will tell you that 9.5 kilometers is a mere nothing when it comes to tank warfare.
In northern Ladakh, Depsang Plains area, a big Chinese build-up in Aksai Chin has forced the Indian Army to deploy armoured vehicles in a big way in this area, including an entire T-90 tank regiment. This too appears to have caught China's attention and possibly foiled attempts to mount more hostile actions in this very sensitive sector. The tanks being wielded by the two Chinese in eastern Ladakh is now well known, but the Chinese are clearly looking to up the ante. While China deploys the Type 15 light tank and the older Type 88 main battle tank, India deploys the T-72 and the more capable T-90 Bhishma, its mainstay in the armoured corps. War isn't a video game and must never be treated as such. Having said that, all of these tanks are capable and warfare between them, while a remote possibility still sits on a razor's edge. As the two sides await the next talks engagement between military commanders. Tank commanders on the frontier will be exercising maximum caution in the face of non-stop provocation. With Shivarur, Bureau Report, India Today.
Tanks have been deployed in different parts of eastern Ladakh, which has led many people to wonder whether a tank battle is possible. And China's video today really calls attention to the fact that the Chinese are thinking about destroying tanks. But why are they so spooked about it? Let me show you where all in eastern Ladakh right now tanks have been deployed. On the banks of the Spangur Tso, which is just south of the Pangong Lake, there are T-72 tanks of the Indian Army, T-90 tanks of the Indian Army, and there are also Type 15 light mountain tanks of the Chinese Army. The difference now is that the Chinese tanks are within line of sight of Indian positions on the heights south of Pangong Tso. But apart from there, the Rechinla, which is further south from the Spangur Gap, south of the Pangong Tso Lake, there is Rechinla, which is a very narrow pass. There have been positions taken by the Indian Army here as well. Here also, Indian Army tanks have rolled up to that particular area, even though they're not permanently stationed there, and the Chinese have been pretty spooked. They've got some Type 88 and Type 15 tanks deployed in that particular area as well. Also in Depsang, which is far away from Pangong towards the north, northern Ladakh, near Daulat Beg Oldi, pretty much the frontier areas, T-72 tanks have been deployed there as well by the Indian Army, and there also there are Type 15 tanks and Type 88 tanks of the Chinese Army. So there are tanks looking at each other from not very large distances in this place. Brigadier Thapar, quick question from you. The Chinese putting out videos saying Indian tanks will be destroyed. I'm wondering whether our deployments have unnerved them in some places. I don't want to use any extreme words because this is a fluid situation, but obviously propaganda does tie in with what they're seeing on the ground, and perhaps certain Indian preemptive actions, including with tanks, may have been taken into account by the Chinese.
Of course, that's what's happened in eastern Ladakh. That's what, for the past 7 days, that's what has rattled them. You see, you're talking of tanks. These are mountains, not deserts or plains. There are limited avenues along which the tanks can move, little bit channels. As of now, we are dominating those channels in eastern Ladakh. There is no way Chinese can operate in these avenues without substantial damage, even if they attempt, because we're holding the shoulders. This 9-kilometer gap which you're saying is the only one. If they manage to come there, our tanks are already in position. So it is a fait accompli we presented to them. They cannot operate along this. So the tanks which are stationed in this place are, I would say, utterly useless for the moment. So that is what has frustrated them. That is what is, and the second part is, in mountains, observation is everything. Observation, domination is everything. If you can observe the enemy, you can dominate his approach. You won 3/4 of the battle. You can target him at much longer distances, whereas he cannot do you much because you dug in. So what we've dominated, we've taken the heights. We are watching them in the Spangur Gap, the Maldo, and all those areas. So they know that. They are aware that we are watching each move of theirs, and hence they cannot do much along that. That is added to their frustration.
It's added to their frustration, and it has directly fueled the videos that they're actually putting out. Remember that in such a battlefield, you heard it from the veterans, tanks may not make much of a difference even if they do elsewhere. But that doesn't mean that tanks are not deployed in large numbers, because at the end of the day, armored elements have been deployed there. And that's one of the reasons why some believe that in certain areas there could be some kind of tank engagement if, God forbid, hostilities break out. India has the trusty T-72 and T-90 tanks deployed there. The Chinese have the Type 15, which is a light mountain tank, which has been deployed in pretty sizable numbers in that particular area. India also has the T-90 Bhishma tank deployed there, whereas China has the Type 88 tank. So different kinds of tanks, at least 4 varieties of tanks have been deployed in that particular area. And at this point of time, those numbers are only likely to increase given that this is still happening.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.